All right, let's get started here in Civil 3D. Back in March of 2017, I did a webcast on how to use the shared reference point command and to carry coordinate systems across from Civil 3D to Revit into Navisworks maybe, and even into InfraWorks, and marry up the building to your Civil 3D model. So I took that data set, and that's what I'm using for my land development data set. So as you can see here, I've got parking, I've got my building envelope, my Revit building would stick right on there. But I tell you all that because I'm going to post the shared reference point video and make access to that data set for you if you want it. You'll probably just want to email me and you can have all of that data if you'd like. But I wanted to start here in Civil 3D because this is where we have started to build our design. We've got a surface that's generated here that is an all-in-one surface, meaning I've merged the proposed grades with the existing grades so that we have an overall surface that we can use. Now we're not going to stay long here in Civil 3D because what I'm concerned with today, and I say we're not going to stay long here in Civil 3D because you can go back and watch that shared reference point video, and that will bring you up to speed as to everything I've got here. So one thing I did want to add though is I wanted to add this pipe network because in VR experiences, I want to be able to see through the pavement, all right, and see through the grass areas and things of that nature and walk around and see the utilities underneath the ground. All right, so that's one of the things that we're going to show that's in addition in this particular data set. We're also going to animate a car, and I'll talk about that, and eventually we're going to animate some people and things of that nature. But we want to start here with the utilities that I've got in Civil 3D because we want to bring those across into InfraWorks that we're using as our aggregator of data. All right, so if I look here, this is just a pipe network, all right? This is Civil 3D pipes and structures. So what I want to do to start off is I want to flip to like a perspective view, maybe Southwest isometric, because if I run the command to export these pipes and things of that nature out as solids, it's going to tell me that I need to be in a view to get better access to my data. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip into that view, and I'll go ahead and turn off my surface here so that you can see what I'm trying to export out a little bit easier. All right, so now I can see my pipes. So I'm just going to type at the command line, convert to 3D solids. All right, I can just type convert and then it will go ahead and populate the rest of that word out. I'll select my AEC objects to convert, so I'll just pick those. And you can see in this view, and once I turn my surface off, it makes it real easy to do that. I'll go ahead and hit enter. It asks me if I want to erase those objects, and no, I absolutely do not. I want my pipe network to stay whole here inside of my model. All right, I hit no, and it created the solids. I'll go back to my plan view here, and I will basically export out the solids. So if I select one of my structures here, you can see that it goes to a layer and it doesn't pull the structure because it's underneath. If I change my display order, then the structure would come up, but I don't want it to. I just want to select one of the structures and one of the pipes, right click and hit select similar. All right. And we're just going to go up to the application button in the corner and we'll select export to an FBX. All right. We're going to be doing this a lot in this series and in future series. So I'm going to start my folder system here. So if I go out to my save location where I'm saving things and I've got my level 2 videos that I'm generating, I would select a new folder and I would call it Civil 3D FBX out. All right. You can name this whatever you want, but I highly recommend you building a folder system of some sort in the manner that I'm going to walk through in this series. I'll go ahead and get into that folder and I'll call this pipes and structures. All right. Just name it what it is. I hit save and I'll go ahead and select it. It wants to know what entities that I want to export. So I've got these selected already. So I'll go ahead and hit my select objects button and it should come up here in my command line and tell me that I've got 11 selected. All right, it found 11. The rest of this I can leave alone and just hit OK, and it exports these out. All right, so now I'm going to jump into InfraWorks real quick, and you can see the model, how it was created. Basically, the way that I defined the asphalt areas and the grass areas and the pond and things of that nature is inside of InfraWorks here. If you look at my data sources, I brought those in as coverages, okay? So these coverage areas, concrete, grass area, this was just literally a polyline or a closed polyline that I exported out as an SDF file or a shape file and brought them in. And when they come into InfraWorks, they come in and I call them coverages, okay, so that I can add the material that I want to represent that particular area. That's all that was done, okay? So we'll be using those quite a bit later on. Whenever we go to make this surface here for the asphalt, we go to make it transparent. Those surfaces will have come through from InfraWorks. So all I'm going to do is I want to drive the point home that we use InfraWorks as the aggregator of data here. So I've got my Revit model, I've got my parking stripes. I've even got my hot dog stand here that I brought in, just some people milling around. These are all static people so far, so they don't move yet, but we will get to that. And I've got some cars, trees, things of that nature. So anything that I want to convey a message or convey the message that my VR will be representing, I can bring it in here to InfraWorks and populate as much of it as possible to bring it into 3ds Max. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in my FBX file that I exported from Civil 3D. All right, so I'll go ahead and drag over my Windows Explorer and show you. It's right here, Civil 3D FBX out. And here's the FBX file. So I'll just drag and drop that in. All right. And all I need to do is set the coordinate system and the type. So this is going to come in as city furniture. And I'm going to set the coordinate system to Mo83CF, which is the coordinate system that my Civil 3D drawing was in. I'll hit close and refresh. And you'll be able to see a little stub of pipe right here. All right, in InfraWorks. All right, that's a good start. But where is the pipe and the structures? All right, so if I zoom on in, I can see right here that there is the top of one of the structures. That's the man entrance. So I can see here, there's one of those. I've got another one here and here. Now, if I go to my engineering view, I can see those pipes and structures underneath the surface. All right. And I will say, yes, this structure is out in the parking lot, but I did that by design because we could go back and move this and then update things later on. So as of now, I have everything that I want to push to 3ds Max. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom back here, and I'll go back to my conceptual view, close my data sources box, and I'm going to export out a 3D model. All right. So we did this before in part 1. These steps that I show in the first part, that's going to be the same steps that we used last time, but I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go ahead and select a polygon for my area. All right, and I'll go ahead and tell it that my coordinate system is Mo83CF. Now, the things that I told you to look for before, if you go down here to your origin and set it to user defined, we need to backspace out these decimal places. All right. After that, we'll go ahead and tell it that we want it to export multiple files. All right. I want a file for my ground, my building, my city furniture, pipelines, trees, all of that information. All right. So I'm going to hit set location, and we're going to start adding to our folder system a little bit more. All right. I'll scroll on down to projects, my video for YouTube, and I'll go ahead and create a new folder, and I'll call this InfraWorks FBX out, and I'll select that folder. All right, the last two options here, we can leave these to check default, and we're good to go. And we simply hit export. Now, it does take just a little bit of time here to export this out. All right, so the more that your model, the more that you have in your model, the longer it is going to take to export out this FBX file. Now, when I say it takes a while, you're talking about 5 minutes. Okay, so it's not a monumental amount of time, but again, I want you to understand that if you do have a lot of information in this model, it will take just a little bit of time to export that out. All right, once it's done exporting, this is what you'll have. You'll have individual FBX files that come in that you can drop into 3ds Max, and we can start to populate our model in 3ds Max. So this is where I'm going to stop for part 1, In part 2, we will be working with how to get the information from the FBX files here that we've exported into 3ds Max, and then go ahead and push all of this information to 3ds Max Interactive. We stopped right here in InfraWorks after we had brought in our pipe network as a solid from Civil 3D so that we could see underneath or have it show underneath our pavement. All right, I'll show you that real quick. We brought this pipe network in, and then we exported out an FBX file so that we can start populating things inside of 3ds Max. All right, so this is what it exported out. So we're going to import each of these FBX files into 3ds Max. So I've got a blank session of 3ds Max open here. So my scene is brand new and fresh. So I'm simply going to start off by just going to File and Import. And I'm going to import my ground from that area. All right. So I'll scroll out to where my data is at, my data folders. All right. That's under D. All right. And I can look here at my InfraWorks FBX out folder. And I can start here. These 5 files have got to come in. So I'm going to grab my ground first. And we don't have to change any of the presets. So I'll hit OK. And that FBX file comes in. And it's a good start for us. Okay. I'll go ahead and go to File, Import, and I'll do the same thing again for the building. All right. And it'll bring in an FBX of the building that I had on my InfraWorks model. Same thing again. I'll bring in my city furniture. Now the city furniture, if you remember, was my pipe network was actually part of that city furniture. So when it populates, you'll be able to see it here. So not only the cars and the street lamps and things of that nature, but the pipe networks themselves as solids. Go ahead and bring in the pipelines. Now I use pipelines to represent my parking stalls. That's just one way of doing it. Does a good job doing it that way. So that's again, like I said, it's just one way of doing those things. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my trees, and then I will be done with my importing. All right, there's only really a couple things we're going to do here in 3ds Max. We're going to run that script that I talked about in the last series, the VR to Drone series. That script is called the Meshinator. If you would like this script, please email me at john.sayer, S-A-Y-R-E, at autodesk.com, and I will email you that script. All right, so first thing we're going to save. I'm going to go ahead and save my model. All right, I don't want to go any further without saving. I don't like to reproduce work. I'm sure you don't either. So I'm going to go ahead and create my 3ds Max folder. Again, you can call this whatever you want. And I'm just going to call this VR level 2. Hit save, and it saves my model. Now the script that I was talking about, if you look here, if you'd like to use this data set, you're more than welcome to use it. You can email me about that also, but I've got this in a tools folder. All right, and it's called this Fix InfraWorks Mesh script. So I just drag and drop that on the screen, and I make sure that I go ahead and select everything in my scene, and then I can check that I want to clean up all 3 of these items. Now again, the hardest part here is just browsing out to where my folder system's at. So I'm going to go out to that same folder system, and I'll create another new folder. I'm going to call this New Textures. So if you remember in the last series, I talked about that this particular script is going to create the textures with the correct naming conventions. So it is definitely a time saver rather than trying to build it on your own in 3ds Max Interactive. So I selected my folder. I'm going to just go ahead and hit go, and then I'll show you what it's doing here. In my new textures folder, it is populating all those textures. You can see it repopulates the people, everything that needs these textures, or actually every texture that's inside of the model. It is renaming it to the right convention. All right. So that's all we do here inside of 3ds Max. I'm going to go ahead and save my model again. And then I've opened up 3ds Max Interactive here. And we're going to start this off by creating it from a template. All right, so we're going to use this HTC Vive template that they have, and that's what we used before. That's the VR hardware that I have. So I go ahead and select VR HTC Vive and hit create. And we're going to call this, I'll just call it VR level 1, and we'll just call it YouTube so that I can differentiate it. It's not level 1, it's actually level 2. All right, and I'll choose the directory, and again, I got to scroll back out here to where that's at. And I will create another new folder under there called 3ds Max Interactive. All right, you could call it whatever you want. I select it and hit OK, and then I hit create. Now what it's doing is it's creating a new scene inside of 3ds Max Interactive, and it's applying all of the default information for the HTC Vive. So whenever that gets through populating here, and I'll show you that, whenever it gets through populating and compiling all of the data, we'll be able to go ahead and create our new level, save our new level, and we'll be able to bring this information from 3ds Max into 3ds Max Interactive. So we'll let it go ahead and compile here real quick. Now while that's compiling, I will say this is the same exact process that I used in level 1. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this is the same for every VR experience that you have. You can take these steps that we've gone through in VR level 1 and VR level 2, and it's just a difference in data. Okay, so we used photogrammetry in VR level 1 and populated our scene in 3ds Max with that data. In this particular data set, we used information from Civil 3D, from InfraWorks, so on and so forth, and we are pushing that information across into 3ds Max Interactive from 3ds Max. So that's the process. It's the same process every time for bringing in information whenever you're using the AEC collection here. So we'll go ahead and let it finish compiling here. All right, so after it's done compiling and creating our scene from the default template, this is what you will see. This is the VR learning level. All right, we do not want to populate anything in here. All right, we want to create our own new level. All right, so we're going to go up to File, and we're going to drop down to New Level, and it gives us our scene like what we're used to seeing here in 3ds Max Interactive. All right, so once we've created our new level, we want to save that level, and we want to be sure that we save it in the Content folder under Levels, or we're going to have a hard time finding it later on, and whenever we create a deployment of this, it won't see this level in the deployment because this is the directory it looks for. So we'll just call this, we're going to leave it lowercase, VR level 2. Okay. We'll need to remember this here in a couple steps that we're going to take here in just a second whenever we tell it what level to default to. Go ahead and hit save. And now we're ready to jump back to 3ds Max, and we can go to the Interactive tab and drop down and select Level Send All. Now in this dialog, we don't have to check anything. We can leave everything default, and you can just hit Send. Now again, it starts flashing on the screen. What it's doing, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, is it's basically creating FBX files and exporting those out. But what it does for you is it automatically brings that into 3ds Max Interactive. All right, so it's going to blink on the screen here just a little bit, and like I said, it's creating FBX files. But here in a minute, it's going to stop blinking on the screen, and it's going to start to populate inside of 3ds Max Interactive. And we'll jump over there and start to take a look at what it's bringing in. All right, now that it's done exporting, you can see down here in Windows, you can see it's starting to populate there. So I'm going to flip back over to 3ds Max Interactive. You can see that it's importing those files. Now, it will import the files, and then it will compile all of the files. We will have everything that we need in our scene that we had from 3ds Max Interactive. Now, a few things that we need to do still in order for this to be able to be a deployable VR. We need to set our static physics, all right? You can't teleport around unless you set your static physics on everything that's inside the scene. We also need to create a player start. We need to edit our project.lua file, all right? That file is going to house what? Well, it houses quite a bit, but it actually, we're able to tell it which level that we want to start in. If you do not change this, it tries to go to the VR learning level, and your VR will not work. right? So this is key. Then we need to edit what's called the functionality teleport flow editor. And that's so that we can teleport around on everything inside of the model. So it does take just a little bit to import these files. So after it gets through importing and compiling, we'll be able to start off by setting the static physics. All right, now that we've got all of our information into 3ds Max Interactive, I want to be able to get to my model pretty quickly. So navigation inside of 3ds Max Interactive is a little bit different. So first off, I'm going to start off by selecting my Explorer tab, and it's going to show me all of the units inside of my model. I'm just going to pick one of those units, all right? And I'm going to hit the F key on my keyboard. That zooms me to that unit. So once I get to there, I can kind of pan down with my right click, or I can select my wheel mouse and I can move 360-degree direction. But that's the easiest way to get it to take you straight to the model inside of your scene here. So be sure just to select one of the units and then hit your F key. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create static physics so that we can teleport wherever we want to on this site. So I'm going to go here to my asset browser, and I'm going to select content and models, and I'll scroll down. I've got that VR level 2. That was the name of my Max file. If you do not name your Max file, it'll just give you a Max folder, okay? All right, so I'll select VR level 2, and it'll show me all my units. I'll select my first unit and scroll all the way to the bottom, hold my shift key down, and I will mass select everything. Right click, and I can select enable static physics. Now, like I said in the last video, once you select enable static physics, it takes it a second for it to kick in and activate, meaning it doesn't just start compiling data. You can see it right here in the lower right. It's compiling that data right now. Wait for it and let it go ahead and compile data. If you think you did not get it selected, just wait for it and see if it comes up with this data compiling bar, because you don't want to try and do it twice, because then it starts to make things redundant. Once everything is compiled, then I can just pick on one of the units here, and I like to keep things clean here in my asset browser. So I'm going to just minimize this stuff back up. All right. Now, next thing we need to do is we need to create a player start. So I'm going to just grab and rotate this by using my right click button, and I'll hit my F key, and I did not have anything selected, so it's tough to zoom with that if you don't have anything selected. Now I have something selected, and I can hit F and it will zoom to that item. All right. So let me see if I can get just a little bit tighter here. So let's go ahead and select our player start, or create our player start location. Now, what we're going to be looking at here whenever we do that is we're going to select the Create tab. We're going to drop down and select player start. Now, I do want to zoom in just a little bit so I can set this pretty accurate, because as you see, it's on like a little bit of a grid system. So I'm going to start my player start here. This is where it's going to spawn me into the VR. So I'm just going to pick once. Now, I can't stress enough, you want to pick once and then hit escape, and then pick outside the box somewhere so that it does just place that player start. You don't want to select more than once, because it'll select 2 player starts. So if you do that by mistake, and I do it all the time, you can just select one of them and then delete it. But I just don't want to have to do that, so I just take those precautionary steps and I'm good to go. Now, once I've selected the player start, now I want to edit my project.lua file. All right, so this is where I'm going to tell it what the default level is. So I'm going to select my name of my project folder. I'm going to go to search, and I'm going to type in project.lua. All right, and I will double click on that file. And right here where it says default level in row 12, I'm going to go ahead and take out VR learning. I'm going to type in VR level 2. Now, this is again why I kept it simple, all lowercase and all no spaces. And I'm going to save. And I'll close this. Now, once we've done that, I want to go ahead and clear my search results, or I won't be able to see any of my other files. And we're going to need to be able to see those here when we edit our functionality teleport flow editor. That's under VR Steam in your asset manager, models, and if I scroll down and I select functionality teleport, I can click on my flow editor. When it does open, folks tend to get a little nervous because of all these flow nodes that are all connected together. Don't worry. So we're going to just modify one flow node. We're going to zoom in here, and you want to modify under the box check normal for spawn location. So right now it's set to equal. It's equal to 1. So anything that is like a 1%, you'll be able to teleport around on, and that's not what we want. So we're going to select equal and hit delete. We're going to right click, go to math, numeric, and greater than or equal to. In the area of B here, the value that we're going to give it is 0.5. So it's going to react that everything 0.5% or greater will be able to teleport around on. That's going to be much better for our situation and pretty much every situation in the VR. So I'm going to go ahead and connect Z to A and value to bool. Once we've done that, we can hit file and save. Once it's saved, we move up to the X, it'll be selectable, and I can close it. Now, that's the last thing that we really need to do before we start to make this ground transparent. So this is a good place to stop for part 2. So the last thing I could do is I could go ahead and test my environment. So if I hit the the test level button, it launches the test level, and you'll be able to see it come up here, and I can look at it. So we could just take this straight to and deploy this particular environment right here. Wouldn't have to do another thing to it, but we're going to go ahead and take it to another step. In part 3, we're going to go ahead and turn the ground transparent, but you'll have to look for part 3 of this series. In the last episode, part 2, we brought in everything from 3ds Max that we wanted for our model to populate into 3ds Max Interactive so that we could go ahead and create our VR. Now in doing that, we did some things here in 3ds Max Interactive. We set our static physics, we created our player start, we edited our project Lua file, which was how we edited what default level it comes in on, and we edited the functionality teleport flow editor. And we could literally have gone and selected a deployer here, and we could have deployed this VR, and we could have opened it up in the HTC Vive environment, and we could have hopped around using our teleport, and we'd have been fine. But let's take it to the next level, because we've got some utilities that are over here that I'd like to be able to see just by the click of a trigger on an HTC Vive hand controller. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of scroll back here. I'm going to spin this around. Let me select something, and then I'll hit F, and I'll go ahead and scroll back around a little bit more, and I'll zoom in. Let me select something else and hit F, and I'll scroll on in. Now, you can see here that I have a pipe. All right, now that tells me that there is a pipe system in here. We know from our last episode, part 2, that there was a pipe system that we had put in here. So let's jump in here and let's show you the workflow, how we can make this asphalt. We'll just start with the asphalt here, how we can make it transparent by the click of a trigger on a HTC Vive controller. All right, so I'm going to select the unit that I want to make transparent. All right, so I select that unit, and then I'm going to go to the level flow tab. All right, this tab is going to be empty. All right, and it's kind of tough to know how to start. All right, so this is the easiest way I know to tell you to start. If you basically select the unit that you want to work with, you have to create what's called a level unit. All right, so if I right click with that asphalt selected, it'll say create level unit. All right, and that is the initial unit that I want to start with. I want to work with this asphalt unit. All right, the asphalt unit has a material, it has a texture, it has everything is, so it has a mesh. So that's the unit that we want to use. It's selected in the viewport, the level viewport, so it will automatically create that if we just right click and select create level unit. All right, that's the first step. Now that unit name, if I hover here, is asphalt 01_NS. All right, and we need to remember that. We're going to use that here in just a little bit. So if I hit my tab key, I can type in get mesh unit. All right. Now, or get unit mesh, I'm sorry. Get unit mesh. I do that every time too. I'll select get unit mesh. All right, and there's some things that we need to start connecting. So we connect unit to unit, so unit to unit. All right. Once we connected this unit, we can select mesh name, and the mesh for that unit will show up. So we can select it and hit OK. and we're good to go. Now the next flow node that we need to bring in is set mesh slot material, all right? So I'm going to hit tab, I'm going to type set mesh slot material. All right, several things we need to fill out here. Number one, we need to always connect unit to unit. If anything has a unit connection, we need to connect our unit to it. All right, I'm going to pull this down and try and make it as clean as I can. So I'll connect the unit to unit and mesh to mesh. Now, our slot name is what we need to add next. So our slot name is basically going to be the name of our unit. So I'm going to type in asphalt 01 underscore NS. All right, now hit OK. Now, at this point, we need to actually create our transparent material. So we have our material that was generated for the asphalt, but we need to actually create a transparent material for that same asphalt so that we can tell it to switch to it. So I'm going to select here my parent folder, and I can go down to content, and notice that under models that this has changed to a max folder. Remember, I talked a little bit about that in part 1, that it would give you either the name of your max file or a max folder. The max folder is where we need to be. That's where our textures and materials are going to be. I can just search for asphalt, and my asphalt material shows up. All right, so I've got asphalt 01 underscore NS. All right, so I can right click on that material and I can hit duplicate. All right, and it creates a duplicate of that material. Now I would select that material, make sure it's selected, right click and rename it, because we're going to rename it something that we can search. So I'm going to rename it underscore, or backspace the 1 off of the NS, and hit an underscore and type in trans and hit enter. And it's going to prompt us to save, so we'll just save. All right, now once it saves this material, I can select it and go to the property editor. We're going to select the folder here, the select resource button, or folder, select resource folder, and we will do a search for trans. All right, it will bring up the standard transparent version of that, and that's what we need to select for our transparent material. I'll hit OK, and then it gives us some more options. So it gives us the opacity option. So under opacity, I'm going to change that to 0.3. And if I hit enter, you can see this material goes transparent. That's what we want. So after that's set, we go up and hit save, and it saves our material. Now, back here in our set mesh slot material, I can select resource, and I can again type in trans, and it will search and narrow down, and I'll be able to find very easy that material I just created. I hit OK. Now, I have to do this again because this is, we're gonna control this by this set mesh slot material, and then we have to create another one to have it go back to the original material so that it's not transparent. All right, so that's very simple. We can select it, right click and hit copy, and then just paste it back in. And we got to do our housekeeping first. We need to connect the unit to unit, all right, and our mesh to mesh. I'll move this around a little bit. All right, and then our slot name is the same. The only thing that's different is the material itself. So if I type in asphalt, you can see there's our original material. So I'll hit OK, and we are good to go for that part of the setup. Now, how do I want to control this? Well, I can do it with a keyboard button. All right, I'm going to show you that real quick. So if I hit tab and I type in keyboard, we have to have something to control it in the beginning to make sure that this part is set up correctly, and the keyboard's a pretty good way to do that. So I'm going to back this off a little bit, and when the keyboard, actually let's go ahead and do this. Let's tell it the button name we're going to use. So I'm going to click the button name, and I'm going to type in just a T and hit OK. So when I hit the T button, I press the T button, it's going to make it transparent by connecting pressed to in. All right. Now, if I select that keyboard button, right click and copy, and I paste that back in, I'll pan up a little bit here so you can see a little bit better. And I select release because we're going to release that T button. I want it to go back to the original material. So the rest of this we can leave alone. So we can test this right now. All right, so I'm going to go back to my level viewport and I'm going to select test level. What this will do is it'll allow us to see if we've got everything set up correctly. All right, so I can just hit my T button and you can see that the pipe networks underneath the pavement show up. So I released it and it went away. It went back to the original material. If I select it, it's highlighted again, or actually it just sees through it. It's showing through that transparent material. But you can also see that the grass areas are still covering up my pipes, so they're not transparent. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of my test level, and I'm going to go to level flow. All right. Now you have to create a flow like this for every material that pipe network is underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that real quick. All right, so I'll go to level viewport. I'll select my grass here. Now notice there's grass here and there's grass here. We're just going to do this grass in the islands for this demonstration. It would be the same workflow for this grass here. All right, same thing. We selected that grass in the islands. I can right click and hit create level unit for grass. All right, so I'll zoom up and I will type get unit mesh. All right, and I'll move that up and I'll connect unit to unit. And I'll go ahead and select my mesh, grass, and hit OK. Now I'll go ahead and select tab again and I'll type set mesh slot material. All right, and I'll do some housekeeping. I'll connect unit to unit and I'll connect mesh to mesh. And I'll give it a slot name. This slot name will be grass. All right, now we're back to the point where we got to select our resource, which is our transparent material. So here in our search results, where we were before, we're still in that same folder. So I can clear the current search and I can type in grass. I can select that material, right click and select duplicate, and it duplicates that material. Notice it's called it grass 1. I'll right click on that and rename it. Backspace out the 1 and say underscore trans, and I'll save. Now again, same steps as before. We need to select grass trans and then go over here and change our parent resource to that transparent resource. So I'll type in trans and I can see transparent and I hit OK. Once that happens, it gives me the opacity selection. So I'll type in 0.3 at that point. And I'll go ahead and save, and I'm good to go. All right, now I can add that as a resource. So I go up to resource there, my set mesh slot material, and I type in trans. All right, and you can see that grass transparent material. Hit OK. Now again, we need to select the same set mesh slot material and hit copy, and we'll paste that node back in, and we'll change. Actually, let's do our housekeeping. We'll connect unit to unit and mesh to mesh. Our slot name is the same as our slot name above. So I just need to change to the material. So that's just grass. So I can select it and hit OK. And then all we have left to do is just connect our keyboard buttons. So I can actually copy these and paste them back up here because we'll use the same keyboard button. And when it's pressed, I want it to make it transparent. And when it's released, I want it to make it the original material, non-transparent. So now let's test this and see if we've got it connected correctly. So if I go to level viewport and I test my level, all right, I can see my level. And if I hit T, you can see that I can see my structures now. They were underneath the grass, so I can see them underneath the grass. Now, if you have a hard time seeing this, all you have to do is I can kind of move back a little bit, select something and hit F, and then I can zoom in a little bit tighter. All right, and then you test your level and it'll be at that zoom range. And we can hit T and you can see those inlets very well. Now notice that the bottom at the outlet pipe, it's still underneath that other piece of that other area of grass. So we would have to create the same flow node for that. Now, This could be taken care of by exporting out the coverages differently in InfraWorks, and I just didn't go back and change that. So it just created a little bit of extra work for me here in Level Flow, but that's okay. All right, one last thing is I want to set up a Steam VR controller button. All right. Now, the Steam VR controller button is accessed by, if you just right-click here in the Level Flow area, drop down to Steam VR and select Input and Steam VR button. All right. So we have to connect pressed to our transparent material. All right. The button name that we're going to use is the trigger. All right. So you're going to squeeze the trigger on the controller. The controller index is 1. And that's all we set up for just this second. Now we're going to connect, or actually we're going to grab and copy that same button. All right, and we will say released is going to go to our original material. And I could move these things around so that things aren't overlapping. All right, and it's the same button, the same controller index 1. Now we have to tell it that it needs to update the level whenever either the trigger is pressed or released. All right, so it's kind of an update event. All right, so if we type tab, or we hit our tab key and type in level update, all right, that means there's going to be an event. So we just connect update to out and update to out. All right, now once we have deployed this and opened it up in the HTC Vive, then when we squeeze the trigger on the controller number 1, I guess, basically. And I don't know a way to tell you which one's controller number 1. You probably have to mark them once you've run this VR. But you can squeeze that trigger and the ground will go transparent. And if you release it, it will go back to the original material. All right, so that's the flow. And we can go back to our level viewport and we can save this. Just hit save all and save selected. And that's going to save our environment for us. That is all for part 3 of our workflow. That's basically all you have to do to create a transparent surface so that you can see through it, so that you can see your utilities. So when we ended part 3, where we were at in our VR model creation was we had created a transparent surface here for our asphalt and part of our grass. So the grass inside of the areas in the island areas. So I'm going to launch this real quick and let you look. I'll hit my T button. That's what we use to test. And you can see my utilities underneath. All right. So that's where we were in part 3. So in part 4 here, what we want to do is I want to animate a car. So we're going to be going back and forth with 3ds Max just a little bit. So I'm going to start up here. I'm just going to kind of get in position here. All right. And I'm going to go back to 3ds Max. All right. In our 3ds Max model. Now, in our 3ds Max model, I want to actually draw this thing from the other end. I want to flip this 180 degrees. Best way to do this is to change to like our perspective view. Hold our Alt key down and our wheel on our mouse and kind of spin it around. And I can zoom back and spin it around a little bit more. And then zoom back in because I want to place my line that I'm going to use for the car to follow. I'm going to place it from this direction. All right. So once I do that, these next 2 steps are very important. All right. I want to change to my top view. All right. On my view cube. And I'll pan back down. And then I want to change my perspective view to my orthographic. All right. Now the reason I did that is because if I draw a spline, which is what we're going to do, and I draw it when I'm in a perspective view, it's not going to be in the right spot whenever I go to move it back up. All right, so it is key to do those 2 steps. So now what I want to do is I want to create a spline. All right, and it's just no more than a line inside of 3ds Max. So I'm going to select my shapes button, move over and select line. All right. And you're not going to be able to see this line in the beginning, so you want to just kind of eyeball it here. I'm going to pick a point here, 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 and I'll zoom in, and we'll go one more. Actually, let's move over a little bit more, and then we will park the car. All right, and hit enter and escape. All right, if we hit escape, we'll see these the axis, the X, Y, and Z axis. All right, so I'm going to go back to my perspective view. All right, and I'm going to hold my Alt key down on my wheel again to kind of rotate down. You can see that it's put that line at a different plane, and that's fine. So I can go up and select objects, and I can make sure that that line is picked, and then I can hit the move key. All right, it's up here in the toolbar, and I can grab that and move it up, and it will be in the right location. Now, I know what's going through your mind here. That doesn't look like it's laying on the surface. That's okay, because we're going to use Civil View to tell it to follow this line and then stick to this asphalt surface. All right, so I'll go ahead and go back to, I'll go ahead and hit select objects, and I'll go back to my orthographic view and top, and rotate that around. And that's where it's going to run. All right, that's the path it's going to follow. Now, we've got some kinks in our line here that I want to be curved so that the car doesn't hit that and then make a jolt to the left. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select my object again. And then here, I'll select Modify. And in my Modify box, I'll select that line, and it gives me my grip markers. So I'm going to select that grip first, hold my Control button down, and I'm going to select the other grips here that I want to add curves. I won't put one here, and I'll let you see what it does. We'll go ahead and grab that one. Actually, you know what? We'll go ahead and make a curve there too. And we'll scroll down here in our editing dialog, and we will select Fillet. Now, I'm going to hold my left mouse click down over these arrows, and I'm just going to push up, and you can see it's adding curvature to my PVIs. All right, I just get it to where I want it, and I let off, and I hit escape, and I can actually just select the plus sign here, all right, the create button, and it releases that line. And I'll go ahead and save. All right, I like to make sure that I save my line work. If I do something I don't want to have to create it again, I make sure I save. Next step is to select Civil View at the top. All right, I'll go ahead and hit Civil View and hit Start Civil View. Now you can set this to default load whenever it opens 3ds Max. I just don't have it set that way. All right, now that line should still be selected, but if not, that's okay. We can select it in a minute. If I go to Civil View and then go to Civil View, the Civil View option under Civil View, and select Object Placement Style Editor. All right, once that's selected, the dialog will open up, and it was not still selected. So the first thing I'll do is select my parent shape. So if I pick parent shape and then pick that line, it populates with the name of the line. Then I want to hit parent surface. Now, this is going to be the asphalt. So I just picked the asphalt, and notice what the name is. It's the same unit name as what we've been using in our flow editor in part 1, all right, to create the transparency. That's a good check right there. Now we need to add an element that I want to push down that line. So I'm going to hit Add New Element, and I'm going to add a car. All right, I'm just going to use a Cadillac CTS. You can use whatever car you want that's in here. All right, and I'm going to give it a speed. We're going to put it in at 50 miles an hour and hit Apply. Now that will give us a dialog that comes up. It says it's basically just telling us that it's going to adjust the frames here in the animation. All right, just tell it yes, and our car comes in. Now I can drag my animation bar around, and I can see if that car parks. Now, it looks to me that the car is a little bit over. All right, so I'm going to back that up, and I can see that the animation really needs to stop at 574, keyframe 574, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and I'll just tell it no, I don't want to save this style. And then I'm going to select this button right here, Time Configuration, because we need to adjust that back. So I'm going to hit Time Configuration and type in 574 for the end time, hit OK, and notice that it stops there now. Now if I pull my slide bar back, the car now comes in and parks where I want it to. All right. Believe it or not, we're almost there. So if I select orthographic again and go back into perspective mode, I want to kind of spin around a little bit so that I can see the side of the car. All right, I want to be able to see it really, really well. So I zoom in and I hit select objects and I pick the car. Now, if I need to pick the wheels also. All right, be sure to pick the wheels or just the frame of the car will come in. So I'm going to select the car and I'm going to hold my shift key and select each wheel here, or just when you select that wheel, it'll pick the whole wheel assembly. All right. One thing we need to do before we go ahead and export this out is we need to go up into render and we need to drop down to scene converter. All right. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we need to convert the materials that this car is made of. They're mental ray materials, so they don't work very well inside of, matter of fact, they don't transfer at all to 3ds Max Interactive. So we need to convert them to standard materials. So if I go up here and I select create new preset file, and then I go over to the editor tab, I can see my source materials, all right, and you can see the one that we want to convert, mental ray architecture and design. All right, we're going to convert that source file to a standard material. Now you need to be sure to hit add rule, all right, and it'll populate here under conversion rules. Now I want to tell it to apply only to the selected objects, and I always hit apply only selected. We only have one material, all right, so it's only going to apply that one material. Then we can hit convert scene, and it converts those materials to something that 3ds Max Interactive will take. All right, and you'll be able to see that here in a minute whenever we export this FBX file. So the conversion is complete. I'll close this box, and I'm not going to save this preset. That is totally up to you whether you save that preset or not. So if I go up to, with my car still selected and the wheels, if I go up and hit File, Export, and Export Selected, then I can export this car out as one piece. So I'm going to go to my folder. All right, and I'm going to create a folder called Car. And you can put this again anywhere you want. I'll get into that folder and I'll call this CTS and hit save. Now, in the next dialog, there's one thing that we need to be sure of that's selected, or the animation will not come across, and that's this Bake Animation tab. All right, if I go to, when you initially open this, if you've never done this before, this will be minimized. So if I select Bake Animation, be sure that the start and end keyframe numbers are correct. Okay, make sure that they match this. We want it to start at 0 and end at 574. If we've gone through changing the timeline here like we did just a little bit ago, then this should come up perfectly. Just hit OK, and it exports out that car. Now, if you did not convert the scene, you will have about 30 or 40 errors here, okay? And that's basically just telling you that the materials are not going to go across, okay? This is what it should read. There should just be one error. The plugin does not support filter color and refraction map channels. Map number 31, all right? That's fine. We can go ahead and hit OK, and I can save my model in 3ds Max. Now I need to get back into 3ds Max Interactive. When we're back here in Max Interactive, now what we need to do is import the car that we just exported. So again, I'm going to go back up in my asset browser, and I'm going to kind of do a little bit of housekeeping here. So under Content, I want to create a new directory. So I right-click and hit Create Directory, and I'm going to call this Live Assets. All right, you can name it again, whatever you'd like. All right, and in that Live Assets folder, I'm going to create another directory, and I'm going to call that CTS. All right, that's the car. And I will make sure that it is selected. All right. Then I can hit the import button here in my asset browser, and I can bring in that car. All right, so I'm going to go back and select the car folder, and I'll select that FBX file that we exported. Now, once this dialog comes up, we don't have to check anything here. we can drop right down to animation and be sure that new or updated skeleton comes in. And then I always go ahead and select create an animation folder. That way I can find my animation very easily. And I select import. Now, one thing to be aware of, if you do not see this animation skeleton and you only get maybe 3 or 4 files underneath this folder now, then what you need to do is just delete everything out of this folder, and you can just select everything like this, right click and hit delete. All right, I'm not going to do that. But if you've been testing cars and bringing them in or importing several times in the same session, sometimes when you create that or when you import that FBX file, what'll happen is it won't bring everything in. So the way to fix that is just to erase everything out of here, save your project. All right, go up and hit File and Save All. Close the software, open it back up, and then I don't know what it does, but it basically releases that to where whenever you import that FBX file again, this animation skeleton will come in correctly and everything should populate correctly. So I know that that's kind of a crazy way of looking at it, but I wanted to make you aware of that because if, like I said, you may want to test several cars and you may have them name the same thing, all kinds of different things that you could duplicate, and that's how you clear that out, is to delete everything out of there, all right, out of this folder, and save, close the software, open it back up, and then import it again, and you should be fine. All right, so now that we have our information in here, what we need to do is just drag that unit into our scene. All right, so we can drag that CTS car just anywhere, drop it in. And in the property editor, we need to go over here to translate, and I can right click on these arrows, just anywhere over here on these arrows, right click and it goes to 0. All right, so if I right click and clear out X, Y, and Z, the car comes in the right location. All right, now one last thing before we get into our flow node, our animation flow node, we need to select that animations folder. And right now, if I select that animation, you can see it, and the car's a little high. Now, if I hit that, it'll take off, right? But the car's a little bit high in the air. For some reason, you need to go in and select and take off the check marks here, position compression, rotation compression, and scale compression, and then hit save, and you see the car drops down. Now the car will follow the ground the way that it needs to, okay? Once that's set, then what we need to do is select our car, all right? And then we go to our level flow. Now in our level flow, we're going to right click and create a level unit for that CTS, all right? Then we're going to right click, well, we could right click and find it, or we can hit tab and we can type in play animation clip, all right? Now a little housekeeping, we always connect unit to unit. Our animation, if we select that button there, we can select our animation, hit OK. Be sure to do that. I've missed this step before and then wondered why it wouldn't play. Right now it's set to loop, that's fine. All right, and then we need to create a level loaded flow node. All right, and that's so that when it activates, or actually you activate the deployment, all right, then it will automatically start the animation. All right, so if I hit tab and I type in level loaded, all right, and I connect play to out, all right, everything should be in place. All right, so I can go to level viewport and I can test my level. All right, so I'm just going to hit test level and it's going to launch this level again. All right, once this comes up, our car should animate. And it does, in the test level, it does come in really fast in the very beginning. But you can see that the car does drive on in. And I want to show you what it does when it gets to the parking space, because what's going to happen is it's going to loop. All right, it's going to start playing the animation again. And we may not want it to do that. We may want it to park the car. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. All right. And I'm going to go back to my level flow, and I'm simply going to change this loop to false. And then I'll go back to level viewport and test my level again. All right, after it loads here, you'll be able to see the car, and it comes in, All right, and I'm going to let it just play. All right, and it'll turn, come all the way around. We could hit our T button here and we could see our utilities. Or you could squeeze the trigger because we set up a VR trigger for that, or the actual controller trigger, and it should stop. Now, how could we enhance this even more? We could have a person come up like they're getting out of the car and walk to the front door, okay, of the building. That's just another thing that we could do. We could animate several cars inside of this. We could have a car start here and come around and park. We can animate as many vehicles as we want. It's the same flow every time. All right, you start with 3ds Max right here. All right, you draw yourself a spline how you want it to come in and do the workflow or walk through the workflow like we did here in Max using Civil View, and then import it right in and everything works as it should. All right, that's all we have for part 4. That's animating a car. Look for additional steps in this series. I'm going to create a part 5, part 6. The next step should be animating people. I'd like to be able to put some people here in 3ds Max using populate and have them maybe moving around, interacting with each other a little bit, maybe somebody standing there talking on their cell phone, and then have some people walking in the parking lot or walking along the edge of this building. And ultimately, I'd like to have somebody walking around on the backside of this track here, or this concrete sidewalk behind the pond. So that'll just be the next part that we have. We'll just continue to animate things as we move along.